Welcome to Thought to Action by the Herb London Centre for Policy Research. My name's Tim Wilson, and I'm your host for this episode, which is going to be about virus laboratories and epidemiology and virology. My guest today is Steve Hatfill, who's a senior fellow at the London Centre, and he's a real expert in this whole field. Steve has teaches about pandemic preparation. He's a doctor, he is a virologist, he is a radiation biochemist, a microbial geneticist, and has also worked in the military. He's a veteran. He worked at AMRID for a while, and he knows this subject back to front, upwards, downwards, and sideways. Steve, welcome.
Nice to see you, Tim.
And I would ask our followers, please, if you get the chance, like what you see, please give us a thumbs up. Please spread the word to your friends. You can find out more about us at thelondoncentre.org. And we're on Twitter and various other social media at the LCPR. Steve, let's get into this. So, if I have some experience from a long time ago in my British military career working with Porton Down people. Porton Down was the biological research centre for the UK Ministry of Defence. I know that at AMRID you worked on a number of these things, but just from your general experience and what have you, if you were going to set up a level 4 lab for viral research, what precautions would you take before the thing even opened?
Well, there's a number of standard operating procedures that come along with these laboratories. The first includes the mechanical infrastructure. This is the HEPA ventilation systems, scheduling. These filters have to be changed at regular intervals. Water purification. Everything that leaves a BSL-4 level lab, or P4, as it's called by the French and some places overseas, has to be sterilized, either through autoclaving in a blow tank, special tank that collects everything and then is heated up.
For those who don't know, autoclaving
or
is
chemical disinfection.
Right. Steve.
So these procedures are very, very strict and have to be adhered to. So you need outside inspectors to ensure compliance. In the United States, this is done by the CDC. And a couple of years ago, Fort Detrick got shut down. There was no danger there, but they weren't strictly following the procedures, and they just shut them down immediately until procedures were fixed.
For our audience, could you just explain what autoclaving is?
Autoclaving is when it's a steam sterilization process where a liquid is heated to very high temperatures under pressure, like a pressure cooker when you cook your turkey on Thanksgiving. And the hot heat under pressure and the steam kills all known life forms inside the chamber or the tank or whatever you're autoclaving. So surgical instruments, they all go into an autoclave. They're thoroughly sterilized before you do the operations. So this is one way to do it. The other way is through chemical disinfection, or a combination of both. Some laboratories do both.
Right.
So your standard operating procedures for how you're going to run this, your maintenance schedules, seals have to be checked. Usually air handling systems are very complicated. These associated physical plants can cost, several $1 million just for like 1,000 square feet of laboratory space.
Yeah.
So you got to have your engineers on site. The more advanced laboratories that I've seen are computer monitored constantly with multiple types of alarm. Physical access has to be restricted, either through pass cards or some things you walk in and the pad counts the number of feet and divides by 2. Okay?
Yeah, restricted and also monitored, I'd guess.
Yes, sir. Automatic, you don't go in these labs unless you're authorized. And there's a variety of systems, including closed circuit TV, that monitor this 24/7.
Right.
So the physical procedures, outside building security, this type of thing. Rapid reaction.
Yep.
These facilities have their own police officers or military, and these are very, very carefully monitored. In addition, usually the amount of materials that you're storing inside the lab are very, very small. In addition, they're usually kept at under liquid nitrogen, and so if somebody tries to take something out, it's not going to be a out. The big thing are your people. And this is where a lot of effort goes in. So background checks, this type of thing, psychological, and associated with that, with your reliable personnel, is a health monitoring program. This is extremely important. So if the researchers are working with an agent that has a known vaccine, then they're vaccinated against it. Doesn't matter if they're wearing the spacesuit or working inside a Class A cabinet. They're vaccinated.
Right.
You have to err on the side of caution at all times. The spacesuit's kind of cool looking, uncomfortable to wear really, but that ensures that your entire body is isolated from the pathogen. Researcher safety is paramount, and given the same importance as safety of all the other personnel in the building that aren't in these special negative pressure labs. So these labs are kept under negative atmospheric pressure. So anything that might leak, air is sucked into the lab and passes through HEPA filters and everything before it's exhausted, not from the lab outside.
Accidents can happen anyway, I assume.
Accidents can happen anywhere.
And there's plans for that.
Yeah. And you have to expect something to go wrong. Okay? You can have all the planning in the world. But in the words of Mike Tyson, the first time you're punched in the face, your plan disappears. Okay?
Yep.
So this is engineered into the human performance side. So your health monitoring facility is very important. And along with this is the expectation that somebody's going to have an accident. You have a facility where you can be isolated under negative pressure. You've had a known lab accident. And you have pre-existing doctors that can wear this proper protective equipment, including BSO-4 level, and your quarantine there and your nurse there should you come down with something. A lot is individual responsibility of the scientist. Again, these people are selected and they're very conscientious. They're scientists. They're there to do good.
Yep.
And it's a tremendous responsibility. So you need to watch yourself. If you're going to work with animals, some people don't even drink coffee in the morning. They don't want their hands shaking.
And then can I ask, I remember from Porton Down, there was also monitoring of the local population.
Yeah. Very often. And I've been to Porton Down. It's a wonderful place. It looks like a stud farm for racehorses when you come in. But some of the best people in the world are there, and they're still there working on defense issues. There's no active, offensive stuff.
Yep.
And they've contributed very, very important, both biological and chemical research. It's a wonderful place with a lot of very, very smart people. Until Dave Kelly passed away, I was fairly close with him.
Right.
So just some of the finest people in the world that you could ever hope to work with.
That kind of leads, though. They monitor the local population. They have plans as well for if they detect something.
They're supposed to be.
What sort of plans would those be? How would you deal with it if something did?
This would be case contact tracing. So there's a public health aspect, although this is all extremely remote that this is going to happen. But number one starts with the physical barriers of the researcher.
Yeah.
If you can isolate your airway, and with some pathogens, you need to isolate your skin. So the space suits that are positive pressure, any leak in your suit, the air is going out. Nothing's coming in. And the air that comes into you is high efficiency particular air filtered, HEPA filtered. So if you have to go to the bathroom, you just hold it, keeping you out of the way. When you enter the lab, it's through an airlock to maintain the negative pressure inside the lab. When you exit, you go into the airlock and you're sprayed with EnviroChem or another very, very strong disinfectant, and it's sprayed as a fine mist. It's an aerosol. Yep. So there's no crease or anything that this stuff will not get into on the surface of your suit.
Yep.
And a thorough decontamination, and then you're automatically washed with water afterwards, and you leave the airlock. And the surgical scrubs that you wear go into a special hamper, and you take a shower with disinfectant soap, and then change back into your normal clothing.
Right. But I would also guess that after working in an environment like that for a long time, people get careless, shall we say. People get used to it. They get overly familiar. They start to make assumptions. It's like the hand washing thing, particularly in hospitals. I mean, over and over, we hear about how hand washing makes such a big difference. Yeah. And yet 30 seconds, I believe surgeons are taught to wash their hands for 2 minutes at a time. And that becomes 90 seconds, and then it becomes 60 seconds, then it becomes run your hands under the tap.
Well, the surgeons maintain protocol.
But only because, in part, I'm sure, because, yes, they care a lot about it, but also there are inspectors who watch from time to time. There is
everything's inspected. I mean, this is
quality
control. The reason for this, it's to maintain standards.
Yes, quality control.
Yeah. Working long hours in these labs, if you start feeling tired or not up to your game, and you're handling live pathogen in animals, you get out.
Right.
And take a break or continue the work tomorrow. Again, there's a lot of individual responsibility to this, and you need to take this serious.
Absolutely, because we are talking about potentially some diseases that could effectively exterminate all human life on the planet.
Well, nothing's killed everyone.
You know what I'm saying, though.
Look at when we had the cases of West Africa, Ebola, 2014. Look at the tremendous 11 patients, and look at the drama this caused.
Yep.
And in reality, our response wasn't that good. And in reality, we dodged a bullet there.
Sure.
So this was a natural event. It had nothing to do with the laboratories.
Absolutely.
So you want high caliber people. You have engineering standards, and there's checklists. I mean, these things are checked every so many hours.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The more advanced facilities, the computers check it constantly.
So you have a level 4 lab. You take all the precautions you possibly can. You still work on the assumption that something is going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So you're going to lay plans for it gets out. What are those plans going to look like?
It would be case contact tracing. If you start feeling ill, there's a whole medical team. You immediately go in.
Right.
And of course, these laboratories have the rapid diagnostic things right there. These are the agents they're working with.
Yeah.
And if we think you've had an exposure, then you're going to go into quarantine for a couple weeks.
Yep.
So, and which is great because you get paid and free meals.
Absolutely.
But this is a responsibility that you have to take.
Right. Moving on to a pandemic starts to occur. We saw quarantining, self-quarantining, we saw masking up, we saw hand washing all emphasized during the Wuhan virus epidemic this last year.
Right.
What 18 months now? What other precautions can you take, and what precautions would you expect anywhere around a laboratory like that? Would you expect them to impose quarantines very quickly, or at least be telling the population self-quarantine if you can?
Wuhan had biosafety level 4. Nice Frenchly built laboratory, P4 lab. There was, on the Wuhan conflict, there were lower biosafety levels. We use BSL-4 when we're dealing with a potentially lethal disease for which there's no vaccine and no drug treatment. Okay, so the only countermeasure we have is isolating you from the agent, hence the suits, the negative pressure, the tremendously expensive physical plant that go along with these laboratories.
Yep.
If you're handling something at a lower biosafety level, this is madness. In China, I think you can only call it the CCP a repressive regime. And should you have an accident, a laboratory accident, the trouble you would get into for reporting it is probably fairly severe.
So there's an incentive.
At the minimum, you're out. Your job, you're gone.
So there's an incentive not to report you're feeling ill.
Yes, sir. I would guess. I've never worked in China.
Right.
But yeah, I would assume so. And there has to be an understanding with the researchers. Just tell us, okay? We're here to help.
Yep.
If there's not, you're going to have possible exposures, and the researcher will go home and I'll just wait and see what happens.
Yep.
Well, once you're near the end of the incubation period and you have live virus in your body and you're excreting it to the environment, your potential source of infection.
Away it goes.
Community screening program. There has to be a sense of trust between the facilities and the researchers, and it has to work as a team.
And under a communist party, that sense of responsibility is suppressed by the desire, the threat you feel from the system.
I would think so.
Yep. Can I just ask one other thing that struck me as very odd about that? When the Chinese Communist Party first started to react to the outbreak in Wuhan, they quarantined a large chunk of Wuhan from traveling throughout China, but they had continued to allow international travel.
This was intentional.
Thank you. That's exactly.
There's no other way to look at this.
Yep.
You notice Beijing didn't really have a problem.
Yep.
When this first started. We believe, some of us, that there's circumstantial evidence that this may have begun as early as August in 2019.
Right.
The Chinese, or the CCP, did not follow international health regulations that they are committed to when they sign on with the World Health Organization, the IHRs. They did not report that they were having an outbreak until New Year's Eve 2019.
Yep.
By then, there's plenty of circumstantial as well as some leaked documents that show at least they were fighting this thing for a month trying to contain it. Now, that's all that can be said at the moment. The origins of the thing are immaterial. The fact is, for the second time in 20 years, the CCP have broken their international health regulations they signed on to and promised to adhere to under the World Health Organization. There's no excuse for this. When you have a release or an outbreak, whether it's natural or whatever, literally every week is important.
Absolutely.
You can't be on high alert all the time as a nation just waiting for the next pandemic, but you can do surveillance.
Absolutely.
And you can ramp up this national surveillance.
Yep.
We know the Chinese tried this through leaked documents.
Yep.
And they were having, right after the first SARS outbreak, SARS-1, in 2003, they established a $120 million national surveillance system to pick up early cases of an influenza-like illness where a team could come in and, rapid mobilization.
Sure.
Because your only chance of stopping this is very early on when you only have a few victims.
Yep.
And you can do case contact tracing. Who are you in contact with? And then you go to there and you quarantine them until for a couple weeks until they show no signs of disease or they test negative. Once you miss this golden opportunity, you're in a bit of trouble if you don't have an effective drug you can give as an outpatient.
Yep. If I may just step back a little bit, I need to wrap it up. So I'm going to put it to you like this. Would you agree if I said, using the very old military sort of ethos of once can be happenstance, twice can be coincidence, but three times is enemy action, the Chinese Communist Party has now gone through happenstance and coincidence?
Yeah.
Would that be a fair thing for us to say and assume?
Yeah.
Dr. Steve Hatfill, thank you very much. That's been really informative. To all our viewers, the londoncentre.org is the website where you can find out more about this. We will be putting it out on our YouTube channel, Thought to Action. Please join us and support what we do at patreon.com/thought to action. We're on social media as well. If you like what we do, spread the word. We need your support. So thank you all for watching. Dr. Steve Hatfill, thank you.